Hi, welcome back to another episode of Fearless Healing Mama. And today I have my sister, my BFF for a very, very long time. Do you prefer to go by MJ?
I don't care. I have a lot of names. Pick one.
So, this is my sister, MJ Lara. And today's episode is about healing generational trauma. And I feel like that was one of our kind of bonding.
That was our common denominator.
So I thought, who better to talk about this with? And I feel like we have both been kind of like on this like generational trauma healing journey, like kind of concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. I feel like there's a lot that goes into that. And I don't think that, as we were talking about today, I don't think a lot of people really even, I don't want to say experience generational trauma, but maybe haven't had quite the same experience with generational trauma as we have.
Yes, I agree.
And so I think maybe a good place to start would be, what would you define generational trauma to be?
I think for me, generational trauma is something, it's like an accumulated ways of life that as you have grown older, you realize it's like, wait a second, that probably wasn't okay. That probably shouldn't be a thing anymore. And then you like watch it, you see it unfold firsthand in everyday situations as you get older and advance in life. I think I became aware a lot of mine when I became a mom. Because like I have realized so many things that happened to me when I was a kid that I would never allow my children.
Yeah.
I would never put them through the same thing.
Yep.
So it's like, then I became aware, okay, this is a generational thing, because the older that I got, I took a step back and was like, my mom was put through this. Yeah. So my mom put me through it. But her mom's mom also put her through that. And it just has become this passed down thing. Yeah. And at some point you have to choose, like, okay, this isn't really okay. Like, this was the way of life back then, and now it no longer is.
Yeah. Well, and then too, I think like that part, again, like you said, as you become a mom, you have those moments where you're like, wait a minute, I could never have done or handled my children the way my parents handled me.
Mm-hmm.
Did your parents ever, mom or dad, talk about like moments now as an adult where you're like, oh shit, that was kind of like really messed up?
Yes. Specifically my dad.
Huh.
And it takes me back to this specific situation where when I was a teenager, when I say teenager, I was probably like 13, 14.
Yeah. So barely a teenager.
Barely. And I made dinner because that was my job. And my dad didn't like what I made because it was too salty. So he threw a fit and he shoved the plate across the table. And I started crying at the table. Because first of all, I'm 14, I shouldn't even be fucking making you dinner. It's not my job. Second of all, how rude. I'm 14, I don't know what I'm doing in the kitchen. Can you imagine 14-year-olds these days being in the
I was barely
kitchen?
able to make macaroni and cheese.
They can't even make a Pop-Tart without burning it. Come on. Anyway, I started crying and he noticed that I was crying and he said, when I was a kid, if my mom made something that my dad didn't like, he would take the plate and throw it out the window. Right in front of her, and he would be mad. And that was just what he did.
Like rationalizing it.
Yes. And so then...
Do you think he felt bad when he saw your reaction to his behavior?
No, it was more like, then do better. You don't want me to do that? Then do better. So then when I got older, I'm just like, man, that I think that's where the grace comes in, because now I have more wisdom and I have more like, I'm a little bit more self-aware that my parents did that because their parents did that to them. My parents did that because they saw their parents do that when they were my age. Doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
But also, like, be better.
Yeah.
And there were so many. And then on my mom's side, we grew up Filipino, full bred. My Lola, which means grandma in my language, she would beat the fuck out of my mom.
Huh.
With the closest thing she could grab.
Yeah.
And that was just the norm. That's how it was, a cultural thing almost. And that's what she did growing up.
Yeah.
With my siblings and I. And the screaming and the yelling and the demeaning words and that you don't use your brain. Are you stupid? Are you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Parents these days would never. Yeah. Because I think we come from that generation that's like, I would never be that to my kids.
Yeah.
So I saw that firsthand, and my grandma was she was 5'2", but listen, she will fuck you up with her words. And my mom got that from her.
Yeah.
And so my mom did that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now, because of that, my love language is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Because I never got, I got the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're just, now as an adult, I'm like, it's not okay, but it's because their parents did that to them. And that's the generational trauma that we're talking about, you know? So now I'm like, it stops here. It ends here. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
My daughter will not be that mom. And my daughter will not be 30 years old telling her friends, my mom used to never let me. Yeah. My mom would say this to me. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest fear. Because
for sure.
Us now at this age, that's all the stories that we share now. Is like, when I was a kid, my mom beat the fuck out of me because she found out that blah blah blah, and my mom would always tell me, look with your eyes, not with your mouth, like, you know. Mm-hmm. And now we're more aware of that as we have become moms with parents that did those things to us.
No, but true, I do feel like even this generation still has parents. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was teaching middle school, and I would have students, and we had a lot of open dialogue, especially in my mental health class, and they would bring up things, and I'm like, oh, honey, we have some time. Do you want to talk about it? Mm-hmm. And so it would kind of become like a small group type thing where kids would start chiming in. And even my middle school students were like, well, I know that my mom's just like that because my grandma's like that.
Rationalizing.
Right.
Bad behavior.
Right. And so I do feel like a big part of that is like that self-awareness, to step outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. And instead of it being like, well, this is just how I was raised, and saying I want better or different for my kids, where it's like, I know how that made me feel, and I never want my kids to feel that way or grow up that way, like with that mentality. It's just.
But then also, like, there's a fine line where you find yourself teeter-tottering on. Like, it's almost going from one extreme to another extreme. And I said this earlier. Yeah. It's like, my parents did this, so I would never do that. Yeah. And then you actually find yourself in the situation. And it almost is like hindsight 2020. Like, oh, okay, I get why my mom would handle this kind of situation. Yeah. So how can I handle it differently but still have the outcome that I want?
Right. Yeah.
Without, like, passing on trauma to them. But also, like, get your shit together, you know?
Yep. So, when do you feel like I feel like there's, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like I had a moment where I was like, before I had kids, because I do feel like having kids brought the change, put the change in action. Mm-hmm. But like, did you have a moment where before kids where you were like, this is low-key fucked up, or like something isn't right here, but I can't quite put my finger on it, or like, where you were like, this isn't healthy? Like the bottom line was like, this is not good or healthy.
Like for my upbringing?
Yeah.
Yes. Because short history lesson. I know your listeners don't know. I grew up Mormon. So it's just a double whammy, guys. I grew up Mormon. I was born into the Mormon church. And so there is just so many standards and rules of that you have to's and you can't. And I left the church at 18. I also moved out, voluntold to move out at 18. And when I got out into the real world, I knew nothing. I didn't know how life worked.
Yeah, real world.
I didn't know how real world was. I didn't know how to manage my emotions. I didn't know that it was okay to talk freely to parents. And even before leaving the house, there were so many moments in my high school years that I would watch and observe my friends, and they would tell me things like, "Oh, I just got my period today for the first time, so my mom's gonna take me to go celebrate because I'm a woman now, and we're gonna go get ice cream, and we might go shopping for some shoes." And it could also very well be a cultural thing, because we don't have that back in my country. Like back home in the Philippines, we don't really do that. Like we don't celebrate and such a natural thing. But then I realized, true story, by the way, this girl was telling me on the bus ride home. She was like, after school, my mom's going to take me to do this because I got my period today. And I almost felt like, oh my God, I'm so excited. My mom's going to do that for me when I get my period. Right. When I got my period, I got yelled at because I put my bloody underwear into the laundry without doing anything because I had no idea. No idea. You know? So instead, I got yelled at, and it was this very traumatizing thing. Like, isn't this supposed to be a celebrated thing? So
like, I was under the impression.
I think you're doing it wrong, Mom. So then, I realized right there and then that the relationship that I had with my mom, my parents in general, wasn't the kind of relationships that other kids my age had with their parents. That they were very open and vulnerable with their parents, and they can talk openly about their crush at school. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do that. Yeah. So from a very young age, I learned to suppress and hold a lot of stuff in. And from a very young age, pen and paper became my best friend. And a pen and paper would know so much more about me than my own parents did. Then the day came where my parents found the pen and the paper. Shit hit the fan, girl. That's all I gotta say.
I don't think my parents ever looked at mine.
They found it.
But it was kind of like an escape, I feel like.
Yeah.
To have that in that type of environment. Yeah. For sure. It was just kind of like...
Because I don't know about you growing up in your household with your siblings and the way that your parents were at the time, but it almost felt very isolating for me.
Oh, 1,000%.
Because...
1,000%.
Keep in mind, I was 7 years older than the next sibling. So I was adopted at 10. They had their first biological child. She was 3 years old already when I came to the country. So there was already this gap of like, I'm the big sister figure, like big sister, 7 years, big sister. Yeah. And you're just barely learning how to use the toilet. Yeah. So I was literally alone. Like I didn't have a bond. I didn't have anybody. And so very quickly, I was like, I'm going to write all my thoughts on paper, which is so funny that we did that as a kid now, because now these days, therapists are like, journal. Yeah. Write in your journal every night. And this was a thing that we've been doing since we were fucking 10.
Yeah. It was very therapeutic. Because it was like especially when, like I was saying before, like that, when you have your individuality and autonomy, like it was just soldered off. Like it wasn't just stifled or not allowed or whatever. It was like completely cut off, cauterized. Like you did not have that. That was a privilege that you did not have. And you do feel very isolated, and like I don't know if, because I feel like our dads were very similar, but my dad did not like us to get close to anybody. He didn't like my mom to have close friends. And a big part of it was because, and I remember writing this in my journal and feeling very vividly that, like, we had this white picket fence appearance. Like, you know, we were the family that everybody looked up to and, like, admired. But, like, if only they knew what went on behind that facade. And so, like, just that type of isolation where it was like nobody has any idea that this is what is happening. And yeah, just like
I think too,
letting it all out.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I think it's also an organized religion thing.
Yeah.
There's such a thing.
That's a whole other thing.
This is a podcast about generational trauma, not organized religion trauma. Keep it out of it.
Maybe we can do another episode about that.
There is this thing that goes within the organized religion that I don't know what religion you grew up as, but in Mormons, we have our wards, which is the group within the same zip code, I guess, I don't know, that all go to church at the same time. So that's your church family. That's your ward. It's called a ward. And my parents were so like, I found myself turning to members of the church about how I was feeling and about what was happening at home. And I was opening up because I couldn't open up to the grown-ups in my house. So to release some of that pain and frustration and hurt, I would just word vomit to the closest adult that I can find that would listen. And it would get
remotely safe with.
Yes, that I felt remotely safe with. But then very shortly, I regret it because it gets back to my parents because it's a warden. It's not maliciously, but it's like, hey, I talked to Mary. I was Mary back then. Please don't ever call me that. Ever, ever. I talked to Mary and I'm a little concerned. She said this and I'm a little worried. So I don't know what it is that we need to do to help you better your relationship with your daughter, but I suggest
which is the worst thing possible for an abusive household.
Dude.
Worst.
So then I get home and it's just 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of lecture. I can't believe you're talking to church members. Why don't you talk to us?
But that's not really the conversation they're having.
It's not. And it's not because I'm insulted that you went to somebody else instead of me. It's because you're letting the dirty laundry out. Now they think we're this family. And we're not that family. And I'm just like, but we kind of fucking are. So, wake up.
Well, and it's crazy to me because even in those moments, they weren't like, there was like no self-reflection for them where it was like, are we doing something wrong here? Could we be better parents? Like there's no
even in the moment that my mom found my diary and she read it front to back and she read all the negative feelings that I had about everything that was going on in my life, it was very like, why do you hate your dad? Why don't you like your sister? Why do you do that? Why do you hate? And it's never like, what makes you feel that way? What is it that he does that makes you feel that way? And what do I need to do different? How can I help you feel better about the situation? Which now I find myself asking my kids that. Like, sister will tell me, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Okay, baby, what can we do different? What does mommy need to do to help you feel better about that? But back then, it's very like, you can't feel that way because that's wrong. There's no reason for you to feel that way.
That one.
So don't.
Yeah.
So it was already very invalidating. And I think I carry that trauma now in the relationships as a grown-up. Because the second that I feel like you don't hear what I'm telling you, go fuck yourself.
No, I see, my thing was, if I ever expressed anything or whatever it was, well, you have no right to feel that way, or there's no reason why you should feel that way. So like, don't just quit. And then it was just like that repeated training of shut yourself down, just shut it down, just keep operating and get over it. And it doesn't matter how you feel or what you think or whatever. If I'm telling you that you need to get over it, you just need to get over it.
Because I'm your parent and I know what's best for you.
Yep.
You have to honor your father and your mother. God said.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I feel like we should have tequila for this. Bartending?
So I think that part about becoming a mom, it really does change it a lot. I think mine, there might have been a few moments as a kid where I was like, huh, your parents seem a lot nicer.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's
Yeah.
nice. But
Yes.
like, and it is almost kind of like a Stockholm syndrome
Mm-hmm.
thing. I don't know if you ever experienced this, but it was like, well, there's all these reasons, like rationalizing
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you know, and even though I knew I didn't feel good about certain things or whatever, and like, um, with my dad, it was a lot more like, um, more when I got older, it was more physical abuse, but when I was younger, it was more like mental and emotional
Mm-hmm.
abuse and manipulation and whatever. But like, I remember one time my siblings were like going at it with each other, and I I don't know if you ever experienced this, but my big thing was that I was always watching my dad, and I could tell the instant he shifted would be a shift.
Mm-hmm.
And the instant he would shift, I knew I needed to diffuse or move
Mm-hmm.
around or whatever. And I could tell he had shifted. And I was trying to get my siblings like calm down and just please just do whatever you're supposed to do right now. We were trying to leave for school, church. We were leaving for church, and I was like, "You guys just need to get your shoes on. Like we need to go."
Mm-hmm.
And he came. I remember he came flying down the stairs, backhanded me,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "What are you doing? Why are you talking to him that way?" And I remember like as I'm like kind of like it was very slow mo is the way I feel it as I'm like recalling it. But like I remember looking at my siblings and they were all like, and my sister spoke up and she was like, "No, dad, like, she was just trying to help us." I
Mm-hmm.
remember her speaking up for me. She's like, "She's just trying to help us get ready so we could go." And I kind of like tried to speak up a little bit where I was like, "Yeah, mom had said that like we need to get our shoes on."
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't need to be talking to him that way. And I remember he grabbed me by my hair, dragged me out the house backwards. And I remember I was trying to like catch myself from like falling down the stairs, dragged me up to our van and like pushed me. And I remember kind of like stumbling into our van, and he like stormed back into the house. And of course, the kids came like running behind, and like they got their shoes on and they came out into the van. And I remember trying not to cry. And my sister, who had spoken up, she like was like hugging me and she's like, "I'm so sorry." And she was like, gosh, I was probably what, 13, 14 maybe that it was probably like 14, maybe 15. And so she would have been probably about, I feel like she was probably like 7, maybe 8. And she was like, "I'm so sorry, like we should have like been getting ready, and I'm so sorry that happened." And I knew that I would get in more trouble if he saw me upset, but like that was one of like the bigger moments where I was like, holy shit. And I remember
Yeah.
driving to church, and I was like, I'm gonna blow this motherfucker's life up. Like I'm gonna tell everybody what he did, and like how could he do
That
this?
is so crazy.
And like, because he was a more prominent figure in our church, and we grew up like, I don't want to say Baptist, but kind of like a little bit more fundamental, but not overly fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was kind of like, I can't remember if it was that church or not, but he was an elder at one point. And so church leadership And it was kind of one of those, that was one of the bigger moments where I was like, this can't possibly be okay. Like,
Yep.
you know, whooping our asses with belts. And I think at
Yep.
one point we got threatened with switches or whatever. But it, like, that was all like religiously backed and whatever. And like, okay, yeah, I did this thing. And it didn't matter if it was, the discipline was an like, overreach of discipline or whatever, but it was like I deserved it. That was like one thing. That was like a regular thing. But like, that was the moment where I was like, hmm. And then in my 20s, I remember when I was in college, I was talking to like friends in college, and they were telling me same thing, like how close they are with their parents and like how supportive they are of them and like all these different things. And I think my mom would try and send me care package. I think I got maybe 2 care packages,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember some of these girls would get like weekly care packages
Mm-hmm.
and like daily calls with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I couldn't have called my parents, but that wasn't the relationship that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was like probably around in college where I was like, something's not quite right here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not, one is not like the other,
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, well, that's interesting. And I think that was kind of around the time that I started to like unpack everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came back from my first year of college, first and only, my parents started to go through with their divorce. And I think that's then when things really started to open up. I was like, oh shit.
So something was.
Oh, this
really
is
wrong.
really bad. Yeah. I didn't know this, but at one point my dad had punched my brother. And I can't remember if this was right before I left for college or not, or when I was at college. But I think that was one of the moments for my mom where she was like, no, I'm good. I think this is it. Because she had separated from him once before.
Good for your mom.
And I was actually angry with her the first time because I was like, how could she? This is how manipulated I was. Even though I had whatever with my dad the first time they split up, poor dad. Poor dad. Poor thing. All he's ever done is give to this family, but that was the storyline that was fed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And looking back, I'm like, he was a royal piece of shit. Mm-hmm. But it was right there about my 20s that I was like starting to really understand. But yeah, it's funny that you said that with the friends thing.
That story, and I have a story so terrifyingly similar.
I was gonna say, don't you have a story similar to?
Dude, this is why we're best friends. Okay, and we didn't even know all this before we became. Yup, you're my BFF forever. So one time we were getting ready for church, and I was always in charge. I was the oldest, so I was in charge of getting all 5 kids ready. And mom got herself ready, and dad fucked around before he decided to get ready, and it was my job to get all 5 toddlers ready. From the ages of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's crazy to me.
So I was probably maybe like 13, 14. Same fucking age. And I remember all the kids were ready, but it was just, long story short, we were running late for church. If we were running late for church, it was my fault. Mm-hmm. Because the kids weren't ready. Mm-hmm. Even though the kids were ready and we were just waiting for mom to finish getting ready. Something happened and it triggered my dad. And he made it about the fact that we were late for church. And the switch, we were talking about the switch, he made this switch from calm, 0 to 100. And it was like this, I don't know what took over him. And he started yelling at me. And he got in my face, this close, literally this close to my face. He took off his belt from his pants. And he whacked me. And he wasn't mindful of how the belt was positioned in his hands. So he whacked me, and the belt buckle ended up hitting me. And it left this big, huge mark on my thigh. And I cried from the pain.
Well,
I was 14.
Yeah. Yep.
And he was screaming at me. And I remember I tuned him out because I was in so much pain.
Yeah.
And the last words he said to me was, "Get out of here before I slap you in the face." He had just finished whacking me with the belt. We get
Had
in
he
the
ever
car.
slapped you before that?
No. He smacked me with the belt a lot, but that was the one and only time that the buckle hit me. So he just didn't really care.
Yeah.
So everybody gets in the car. I'm crying. I cried. I didn't have a sister that was like, I was literally alone.
Right.
The kids
Yeah.
didn't know. It was
Yeah.
so normal to them.
Right.
So we get to church and I'm crying. I go to Sunday school. I'm still crying. The teacher of that Sunday school class.
So he actually let you go into church crying?
Yes. And my mom had no idea.
Shame. Like, no, nothing.
Fuck no. He didn't care. My mom had no idea what the fuck just happened because she was still upstairs getting ready. We get to church, we get to through sacrament. I go to Sunday school and I'm sobbing. I'm still sobbing because all I was thinking about was, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I get home, I'm gonna go kill myself.
Yeah.
The teacher noticed and she was like, "Come outside, come talk to me." She was like, "What's wrong? I noticed, is everything okay?" Again, I will talk to the first grown-up outside of my house that will listen. So I word vomited, tears in my eyes, sobbing. And she said, "Okay, did it leave a mark?" I lifted my dress and there was this, like this big of a bruise. Fresh bruise. And she was like, "Okay." She was comforting me. She hugged me. We carry on with Sunday school. The very next day, CPS shows up at my house. And I was terrified because even though they were there for me, I knew as soon as they left, I was going to get it.
Huh. Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah.
And my mom is like, "You need to stop talking to everybody. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" And in my head, I was like, "You saw me crying.
Why didn't you ask?
You're my mom. It's your job to ask me if I'm okay.
Yeah.
You married that."
Yeah.
And
was she aware of how he was like doing that kind of stuff?
Yes, and she was okay with it. He would backhand my 3-year-old brother. And he would not be at all conscious of the strength that he uses disciplining my siblings.
He didn't care.
He didn't care. That it would leave a mark. And there were a few times that I remember my mom being like, "You hit him too hard." But that was it. Stop. Like, there was never anything like, "Don't do that to my child. Don't yell at them like that. Don't hit them." It was just, to her, that was how he disciplined. But also we go back to, that's how she was disciplined when she was a kid. So it was okay. So then CPS, it was this big whole thing. I got the brunt of it, and she was so upset that and she was like, her biggest thing was, "You need to stop telling everybody. You need to tell me." And she said, "And you need to not hit her with a belt anymore." And that was the one and only time I ever heard my mom defend me in a matter of 3 seconds.
Do you think she would have done that if CPS had?
No.
Like, that's just so, I mean, as moms today, that is just like so mind-boggling.
Yes. Oh my God, I could not even imagine if CPS knocked on my door because I'm a good fucking mom.
Yeah.
Why the fuck are you here? Get out of my house.
Yeah.
But no, she would have never, it was never addressed after that. That was it. They just came, they did a welfare check, and that was it. And after that,
did they talk to you?
I think so. They talked to me. It was very vague. They asked if I get hit all the time, and I told them the truth. But yeah, he hits me with a belt, but it wasn't enough for them to do anything about it. And it's so sad because at that time I was like, "Please get me out of this house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put me in the system."
Yeah.
And no, there wasn't enough evidence of child abuse. It was just a dad disciplining. But for me, yeah, maybe it wasn't physical all the time, but it was very much so mental and emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the sad thing is, I know this has been discussed amongst like domestic violence survivors too, but like with physical abuse, it is very much, it happens and it's done. but like that emotional and mental abuse, it like is on a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just expands and expands and expands, and it's more and more, and it just like it just soaks into you.
Mm-hmm.
And like you gotta like scrub to get that shit out. Like it's hardcore. Yeah.
It's a lot of work
Yeah.
to be that aware of what you came from and why it's not okay.
And it's crazy because it is almost like very sneaky the way it happened. And even to this day, there's certain things that will happen where I'm like, why am I so triggered? What is going on?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And even to this day, it's like, wow.
Yes.
Oh, new trigger. And
I didn't even know you were there.
Like, I didn't really realize.
It's so true.
And you have to dig really deep.
And it's weird because for me, it unfolds in relationships with grown-ups. Not so much so yet. I mean, my kids are young, 8 and 9. So not so much so with my kids just yet.
Yeah.
But people always say, like, your inner child, your inner child. So, like, I see my inner child a lot with my relationship now.
Yeah.
Like, you're saying that to me, and I don't like it because when I was a kid, that used to be said a lot to me. Or when you ask me what's wrong and you're telling me to stop shutting down, I'll shut down more. And it almost translates into whether it's friendship relationship, romantic relationships, family relationships now. And even now, my relationship with my parents are very, like, it's just years, like we said earlier, it's years of practice. And I think there is a part of me, I'm still a little guilty with the people pleasing to where they're states away. So it's easier for me to be like, yeah, okay. Versus if they were closer, then I think it would be more of an active effort to not people please anymore. But because I see them maybe once a year, it's like, it's fine. They're only here for 3 days, you know? And I don't think that that's something that I understand it, but I don't think I'll ever accept it. So I always try to keep them at an arm's length. I love them, but I'm never going to stop healing from what I went through in that household.
Yeah.
So in order for me to not get sucked back into that, I love you from afar.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm very much a cutter-offer. I feel like it is kind of the easy way out because I don't ever fully sort out whatever. But on the other hand, I'm so hyper protective and I will just cut you off so fast. You will never hear from me again. You will talk to yourself in my inbox and I will pretend like you never fucking existed. Like to this day, I think in the last maybe like 6-ish years, maybe. I think I recently asked my dad about an account I had with his, like, because he used to be a CFO for an organization, and it was like where you could have like investment accounts or like savings accounts or whatever. And at one point I had one there, but he had handled all of it. And I don't ever really recall closing it down. So I was asking him questions about that. And I think I sent him like 2 messages and got 1, maybe 2 text messages back from him in regards to that. Otherwise, in the last 6 years, that's the only thing I've ever sent him. And he'll send me like text messages.
I cut my family off for a very long time. I cut them off for maybe like 4 or 5 years. And it was another one of those moments where I'm like, this is when we found each other. I got pregnant with my daughter, and the first thing I wanted to do was run to a mom. It didn't necessarily have to be my mom, but I wanted to run to a mom.
Isn't that crazy?
Because I had
That's all you want.
Human growing in my belly, and I have no fucking idea I was 18.
Yeah.
I was a baby, growing a baby, and I just wanted a mom's comfort. And even if I ran to my mom at that time, I knew I wasn't going to get what I needed.
Yeah.
Because
I think you even had told me that at one point.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know why I want this so bad, because I know I'm not going to get what I want.
It's not going to be what I need.
Yep, right, yep.
But I wanted her. And I found at that time, it's so funny how the universe works, because at that time I found you. And then at that time I found Stephanie, which is a mom she's my mom as a grown-up. She's my mom. It's weird when mom. Yes. I adopted myself into her family. Sorry, no choice. And it's so weird when I explain it to people, but there's times that I find myself talking more about, oh, my mom and Abilene versus, And so I just wanted to run to her because I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But also, I hate to say it out loud, but I don't think my mom really has nurturing. My mom, she doesn't really have a nurturing nature.
No, she doesn't.
Because I
know her. I don't know her, but
I raised the kids.
I know her.
And I did it for a long time.
Yeah.
I raised the kids. I helped potty train the kids. I made them breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Well, and that's the crazy part. Like, as you're sitting here, like, talking about it, I don't think it's ever really fully hit me that, like, you were actually the mom. Like, the mom. Where was she?
She was working. And I was homeschooled. This wasn't the narrative in their heads, but this is the narrative in my head. I was homeschooled during middle school so that I could watch the kids.
Yeah.
And raise the kids. So I did. And so when I cut them off for those 5 years, when I was became pregnant, it was really hard for me because I missed my siblings. I raised them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it wasn't until recent that my parents, my mom specifically, figured out that, okay, something's got to give. Yeah. I need to change something or my kids will start.
Well, and once they start leaving the house, something changes. You know what I mean? Because it's not the same anymore.
What was the big thing for your mom? What was that moment where she was like, holy shit, I've been brainwashed this whole time? Or I need to be a better mom or I'm going to lose all my kids?
I think for her, it was a lot of, like, again, the generational trauma of this is what I'm familiar with, and I can relate that to my own failed 2 marriages.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's familiar to me, and so this doesn't feel like a red flag. Mm-hmm. And it might kind of be like a moment where it's like, well, that's different, but, like, again, when you grow up with and have always been around a manipulative father figure or whatever, somebody who always manages to make it all flow, good or bad. Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes sense. And so, like, for her, a lot of it has been like hindsight is 2020. Mm-hmm. So, like, she's told me about how, like, when they were first married and he moved her away from Minnesota to Illinois, and he would limit the amount of time she could spend on the phone talking to her mom, and that he would stand there and listen to their conversation. And then I specifically remember this. They only had one car, and we would ride in those little bicycle carriages, like the hitch things. I remember riding in that with her to the grocery store, and I remember it was a long ride, and I remember being hot and sweaty, and I was like 4, maybe 5 years old. Mm-hmm. I remember being this thing and being like, sometimes it would be fun, and she would make it fun, and then other times it was like, this is miserable, why are we doing this? To go to the grocery store and get groceries, because he would not leave her the vehicle for her and her 2 kids, like 5 and under.
My wife today will Uber to work. If I needed the car for a pedicure,
not even
she would be like, let me leave you the car, honey. I'll Uber to work.
And I think at one point I even asked her, I was like, you couldn't drive him to work so that you could have the vehicle?
Okay.
No. She was like, no.
I think it's a
He would,
masculine thing too.
well, and not even that. It was very much a manipulation and control thing because he did not want her to have the ability to have, like, again, that autonomy and that individuality. So she couldn't go out and hang out with friends, she couldn't, whatever. And it was almost down to like a degrading point, because in my opinion, and like the way I feel about it now, I'm like, that is so degrading that I would have to literally cart my children around to go get groceries to cook you food. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Period. And so, like, she'll tell me these stories, but like, it is kind of like that smokescreen of like, he could explain it away, and it was like, well, this is what can I possibly change about it? And she didn't work. And it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, what am I gonna do about it?
But it's almost like this narrative of like, well, you don't even have to work, you just stay home,
Right.
you enjoy the
You
kids,
don't need it.
you don't need it.
Yeah. But for her, I feel like from the stories she's told me and some of my own personal experiences, I do feel like it was very gradual. He definitely built up to and it, like, that acclimation to the abuse and the manipulation and whatever. And I think,
do you think she stayed because she was that manipulated and brainwashed, or do you think there was a part of her that was like, this isn't okay, but I'm going to stay for my kids?
both. I think it was pretty much 50-50. But I think
That's
that
rough, man.
she had a friend who we all started to get close to. Like, us kids would hang out with this friend of hers, and she had older kids, but they were like still cool and like let us hang out with them or whatever. But this friend, I think it was for a wedding or an event or something, she had like a sleeveless dress on, and she saw bruises on my mom and was like, Carlin, explain yourself. What the fuck is going on? And I think that was the moment that my mom was kind of like, maybe this isn't as okay as I thought it was. And then, see, my dad was the opposite from yours. He hid his physical abuse of me and my brother from my mom. Because I remember when I got older, it was literally like probably within the last, like,
you guys don't tell your mom?
5 or 7 years. Well, so this was the thing. It was probably 5 or 7 years ago, and I was telling my mom a story about something that had happened. And she's like, wait, what? And I was like,
oh, you didn't know?
I thought you knew. And she was like, no. And she was like so absolutely horrified. And I was like, Mom, I thought that you knew. So what my dad would do is, at the house where the physical abuse had started, it was basically a 4-level house. So we had a walk-up attic.
Damn!
We had an upper level, the main floor, and then the basement. And he would take my brother, or drag my brother down sometimes, down to the basement, beat his ass, make him not cry. He was the kind that was like, if you don't stop right now, I'm going to beat your ass again. And it was, stop crying, clean your face up, and go upstairs. So I remember one time, and I didn't realize that he was so physically abusive towards my brother until one time he had taken us both downstairs and like beat both of our asses. And I remember watching him backhand my brother. And I was watching my brother, and I was like, he does this all the time. And I remember bawling my eyes out, and he was so focused on my brother that I just made, like, he dismissed me, but wasn't like, clean your face up or whatever, dismissed me. And I remember like crying up the stairs and like standing at the basement door, like, should I go get Mom? Like, how long is this going to go on for? And my brother was very much the kind that was very stoic about it, where he was like, I'm going to take my beating and you're not going to get a single tear out of me. And so the few times where I would hear something, I was like, he's getting it bad.
Oh my God.
But my mom was always upstairs when he would do this. I never realized, like, I never fully processed everything in all of that he was being so secretive about it. And so when my mom had said that to me, I was like, I thought he did it in front of you at least a few times. And then she was like, well, there was this one time, and I was like, yeah, that's the time I'm thinking of. And then she's like, but that was the time that I went off on him and told him that he was never to act like that again. Like, and she did. And I remember it that way. But like in my head, I was like, well, she's seen it before, regardless if she had like corrected him and was like, you need, because she did. She was like, you need to go upstairs right now. And she was like, you, and I remember hearing her go off on him later in private. I still could hear, where she was like, I swear to God, I better not ever see you do that again. She was like, Steven, that is not okay. And so I remember that whole thing. But in my mind, it was she knew. And so, like, she was complicit. And so then when we had that conversation, where it was almost like, you know, we had two very different versions of this life with him. So that when we put them together, it was like, wow. You know,
I'm so sorry. I'm not ignoring you. Okay, so for your listeners, I have a brother who took his life. It's a very sore subject for me still. It was 3 years ago. And after we laid him to rest, my siblings found on his phone this journal excerpt that he
that's right.
That he wrote.
Yeah, you told me.
And I don't think my parents know that I have this. They sent it to me in private because
your siblings did?
My siblings sent it to me.
Yeah.
Because I was asking for it on the phone. I said, I want to read it.
Right.
Send it to me.
Yeah.
My dad because my phone died. Are you not on my Wi-Fi?
No, I don't know what your Wi-Fi is.
Girl.
Okay, so you were saying.
Okay, I was saying before technical difficulties occurred. I was saying it's so funny that you're talking about your brother being beat and it being hidden because my brother took his life 3 years ago. And he was almost like, it was the monumental shift in our family.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's firstborn son just took his own life. And he was not subtle about it. He did it with people in the house. He wanted to be found. It was almost like a statement that he was making. And there was, if I was to go much deeper into it, there's just so much more meaning. Because, anyway, he would write journal excerpts in his phone. And I asked my siblings, hey, I want to read them. Send them to me. And I was saying this to them on the phone with everybody hearing. Like, my mom and dad were in the room. I was on speaker. It was very kumbaya because we just lost our brother.
Yeah. And
my siblings were telling me we found Kuya Joseph's phone and he had stuff saved in his notes. And I said, I want to see it. I want to see it. And I remember my dad in the background saying, don't send it to her. And the first thing I thought was, why doesn't he want me to see it? What's in there about him? So in those excerpts, there was one specific journal entry that he put that says, my favorite memory of my dad is when I was in the shower and he broke into the bathroom and he came to beat me in the shower because I wouldn't go to church. He was probably 15. And you know, there were the little coin locks on the door, so I'm sure he just busted into that bathroom while he was in the shower. And I just imagined this scene in my head of him beating this 15-year-old kid naked. Yeah. Which is fucking inappropriate.
Yeah, it adds a whole nother layer to it.
So disturbing.
Yeah.
Not okay.
Yeah.
All because he wouldn't go to church. And that jogged my memory of you talking about, because I don't know if my mom knew about that at that time, but of course now she does because it's all out in the public to see. And it makes me so sad because he was the firstborn son, and there's in the Mormon church there's a lot of expectations in boys. You have to be a priesthood, and you have to, and he just wasn't that person. And it was all faith based.
Right. Yeah.
The brainwashing and the manipulation. And I remember so many times, because my biggest thing was they're always yelling at me. They're yelling at me. It's demeaning words, and it makes me feel this small. And I remember one time my dad saying, "It's okay to yell." Jesus yelled at everybody in the temple when they were vandalizing his temple.
Like rationalizing.
Using the fucking Bible.
Oh yeah, my dad did the same thing a lot.
And it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to show my anger because Jesus did that. So if Jesus did it, that means that it's okay. And I'm like, you're also not God. And it's not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that would trigger me so much because it's almost like you're comparing your old little sinner self to this precious gift of God to the world who had his reasons for being angry when you're just fucking angry because why? Because dinner was salty? Get out of here. And I never looked back. I never looked back in the church. And then my brother died, and it just kind of assault to injury. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it was like, now you guys want to get your shit together? Now that you buried your child? Now you want to be a stand-up mom? Now you want to be different to your kids? Now you want to be a better man? Now you want to be a dad?
Yeah.
What's it going to do? It's not going to bring my brother back. Yeah. Now you wish that you were a better parent before he killed himself.
Yeah.
And my siblings were convinced at that time that my brother was pushed to the edge to take his own life because of my parents.
Yeah.
My parents parenting, specifically my dad. And at that time, my siblings were trying to convince my mom to leave. And the same situation happened with you when you were feeling like poor dad. I have another brother, a super sweet, good kid, and he looks up to our dad. And he convinced my mom to stay because dad's old, Mom. What is he gonna do without you? Poor dad. He's old and he needs us to take care of him, and we don't want to choose which parent to go to. And this was just 3 years ago. So they've been married for 20 plus years.
That's one thing I noticed about your parents is that there's definitely a servitude aspect of your mom, of your dad, expectations of your mom,
and it's been
and everybody else.
It's been like that for since the dawn of time.
Pretty crazy.
The dawn of time. And staying with the topic of generational trauma, I think you can agree with me when I say, as the oldest, we're the fucking guinea pigs. Because now looking back, I look at my siblings. Can you keep it down? My wife, she doesn't do this kind of thing, so she's just banging pots and pans in the kitchen. Worse than this. I'm so sorry. I'm not even editing that one out either.
Just dump it.
Take your time, we'll wait.
Trying to pour the ice so quick. Fuck it, Lily. Fuck it. Listen, the kids have been through here running and dropping stuff and throwing stuff and laughing.
She came into town and we're like, podcast? You got it. There's also 5 kids in the house right now, so.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Like they've done pretty good, so.
That's true. But looking back, my siblings never went through the same shit that I went through.
Yeah.
I feel like Joseph, like you said, your brother was very stoic. Joseph was very stoic about it too. Like, I'll take my beating, whatever it is, I deserve it. Yeah. I'll do it because it's what you want me to do. I'll please you. And then the moment that he decided, no, This isn't really, I don't believe in this. He got it. And my other siblings were a little bit more vocal about it. And don't talk to me like that. No, Dad, that's not okay. No, you're wrong. I never had the balls to do that. Jojo never had the balls to do that. And now he's gone. And it's funny because I relate to him so much. And there was that, like I said, period in time where I didn't have any communication with my siblings. So I had no idea what was going on.
Right.
I didn't know that he was suicidal. I didn't know that he wasn't in therapy. I didn't know a lot of things. But the more that I found out from my siblings after the fact, after he was gone, I was like, I went through that. I tried to take my life. And I remember speaking at his funeral and being like, why is he in that box and I'm not? And it all goes down to how it also affects us in different ways. You know, like I went through this, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to become this instead.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, for sure. Like that mentality.
Yes.
When it comes to facing things like
or
that.
I went through this, so this is what I'm going to do. That's also what I'm going to do as the mom. My mom was this way, so I'm going to do the opposite. Or my mom was this way, so I'm going to be that mom.
This is all I've ever known. What else can I do?
It's such a conscious
Yeah.
effort to find the happy medium, because also, like we said earlier, one extreme to another is also not. Like, do whatever the fuck you want. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to teach you how to blah, blah, blah. But also, like, it all comes down to changing the cycle. It ends here, but also you're going to grow up to be a stand-up human being.
Right. Yeah.
Because we can be both. We can be good moms with happy kids and raise stand-up human fucking beings.
Yeah.
To where one day they're going to be like, my mom was a badass and she did what she can, even after the fact that she went through all of this with her mom.
Yeah.
And it's hard fucking work. And the mom guilt never goes away. No. It does not go away. It's a thing that you learn to manage.
Yep.
And it's a thing that you sometimes question and you're like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
And
but what if I told you? Because you have talked to me about that so many times. And I think my biggest thing is that, like, you know, you're doing something right if you are questioning yourself and so worried about whether or not you're being a good mom. That's all you. I am a good mom. Like, just stop. I am a good mom.
And you know what's so sad? Is there wasn't a piece of my mom that I would ever, like, I really try. I try my very hardest to be like, there has to be something that my mom did when I was a kid that I want to instill into my kids. Can't find one. I can't find one. Maybe it was a clean house, but even then, that wasn't her. That was my dad making me do it. And now it's a habit of just clean the fucking house. But there wasn't, like, there's nothing I can think of, which makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. And there's nothing I can tell my kids. My mom used to do this when I was little.
But I think that's so heartbreaking.
It is. It is, because it's like a really big reality check. But then I don't, to a certain extent, I don't fault her for it. Because, again, it's understanding that it's a generational thing.
Grace and forgiveness.
And then I can't even fault her mom for it, because her mom also got it worse.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you could have chosen to not.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
You could have chosen to not be that mom.
Yeah.
Especially after seeing me leave the house and never talking to you again for years.
Yeah.
And then seeing your son, burying your son. And it wasn't until she had to do that me as her child, I had to remove myself from her as her child and see her as another mom. From mom to mom, I just watched this mom bury her son because her son couldn't be her son anymore, so he took his life. And it almost had to be like, you're not my mom. Right now I'm watching you as another mother go through this. And I had to put myself in her shoes and be like, I could never live with myself if my other children blamed me for the loss of that child.
Yeah.
And after that, I saw her very differently. And that's when the grace and the forgiveness came in, because I couldn't hold anything against her anymore.
Yeah.
Because she lost her child.
Yeah. I don't know if I could have done that.
A part of her doing.
See, I'm a type of person. That would just make me much more angry. Like
did.
That would be so. And I know you did have that
for a long
that
time.
part of that healing process.
It was almost like I fucking told you.
Right. Yeah.
Why didn't you learn from me?
Yeah.
Why didn't I didn't leave physically?
Yeah.
I mean, I left physically, but I wasn't gone forever.
Yeah.
You knew somewhere and out in the world I was out there, but you still lost me.
Yeah.
Why didn't you learn from that? Why did it have to take?
Well, and I think that's one of the traits that I admire very much about you, is that you do have like this different level of grace and like understanding with people, where I'm like, fuck that. And I know that like you kind of joke where like that's how you are, but like in reality, like, and I've seen it so many times where it's like just this outpouring of grace and understanding, and like almost kind of like removing yourself from it and being like,
it's a blessing and a curse, bro. I don't know how I got it. I don't know where I got it from. I don't know.
You might still complain about it every now and then.
I do.
But you're
why am I so nice? God, why do I have such a good heart?
But you still show that, and like for me, that's hard. That is a hard thing for me to like comprehend, because I'm very much the type of person, like, I'm a Taurus. Once you wrong me, you have wronged me, and there's no coming back from that. And like I said, I will cut you off and pretend like you never existed. And like, yes, that's partly self-preservation.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is like, I simply cannot, I don't want to say not forgive you, but like, I can never allow you back in.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you could do or say that would convince me otherwise.
And you know, I think in the beginning of the episode, you said something about how everybody handles it differently. Mm-hmm. Everybody has different traumas. Yeah. Everybody handles it differently, but that doesn't mean that your trauma hurt less than mine did.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't mean that my trauma hurt more than yours.
Yeah.
And I think once you experience such a close, a really fucking devastating loss, mm-hmm. like my brother's death really fucked with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, I could have easily been the one in that casket, and I wasn't. And it felt so real to me.
Yeah.
And it really fucked me up.
I know.
And it made me realize, one, my mom is a mom that just lost her child. Anything that happened before that, it's all forgiven. I am so sorry, mom to mom. I am so sorry that you had to do that. I could not even imagine losing my son.
Yeah.
While I was in the house.
Yeah.
My mom physically cut her son down. And he fell limp in her arms. As a mom, I wouldn't be alive.
Yeah.
I couldn't live with myself. And they were describing to me the whole scene, and she was the one that found him. Hanging. Trigger warning, I'm so sorry. She was the one that found him. She had to cut him down. And she was the one that held him until paramedics got there. That is a whole nother trauma for a mother to live with for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
So anything that she didn't correct with my dad and me and my other siblings, anything that happened before that, it was like, there's nothing I can hold against you, because you have to hold that for the rest of your life. And I am so sorry, and I love you, and all is forgiven, not forgotten,
right?
But all is forgiven. For my dad, on the other hand, word has it that he had his video camera just recording everything while they were taking him on a stretcher into the ambulance. Just, I'll never fucking understand. And the empathy and the sympathy isn't there for me with him.
I did not know that.
Disturbing, right?
That's incredibly disturbing.
Neighbors told me. Neighbors were looking out their window because it was just fire trucks and ambulances and cop cars and outside. They're fucking Mormons. They look out their windows.
I just have to say, that's not shocking for me to hear. It's so thoroughly disturbing and disgusting, and like, that's crazy. Literally crazy. But at your wedding, his phone was out like the whole time.
My whole childhood.
So like, and there's definitely like that narcissistic like aspect to that action. Like it is very strange, but like seeing how he was at your wedding and you know the night before or the day before, and you know, but of all things, that's what your mind was preoccupied with.
And his reasoning is that these videotapes and cassettes and DVDs, it has evolved from fucking VHS cassette tapes to DVDs to memory cards now. And he has all of them in his office. And they're all labeled as just his justification of it is that when he passes on, it's his whole life recorded on tape. And that it's his diary. And we get to watch it when
Do I
gone.
get to go to the premiere?
Red carpet, bitch.
Are we going to the Grammys? Or what is it? Is that it? The Grammys music?